Johnny Dollar.
Mr. Dollar, this is Henry Foreman down here in Port Jarvis, New York.
Port Jarvis?
That's right.
Lucky man.
I beg your pardon?
Well, the Delaware River on one side and the Neversink on the other, and that Neversink just happens to be one of my favorite trout streams.
Oh, I see.
Many's the time I've wet a line in that piece of water. Foreman, did you say?
Yes, I'm the local representative for Inter-Allied Life Insurance Company.
What can I do for you, Mr. Foreman?
Not for me, Mr. Dollar, but for one of my clients. I should say the husband of one of our clients, one of our rather important clients.
Yes?
His name is Teckler, Rudolph Teckler, and he lives a few miles north here, the other side of Monticello.
I see.
Lovely place.
Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to the Inter-Allied Life Insurance Company office in Port Jarvis, New York. Following is an account of expenses incurred during my investigation of the Monticello mystery matter. Expense account item 1, $9.10 plane fare to New York. Item 2, $50 deposit on a rental car. I picked up Route 46, then 23, and some 70-odd miles later, pulled into Port Jarvis at the point where Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York all come together. It's a nice little city there on the Delaware. Quite a railroad center, and even better known for its glass companies. Henry Foreman's office was on Main Street, and after the usual howdy-do's, I again asked the question.
Believe me, Mr. Dollar, I don't know anything more about it than I told you on the phone. But in view of this company's policy of service to its clients, service of any kind, well, I felt we must accede to his request that you be brought down here.
I see.
And after all, when you consider the size of Mrs. Teckler's life policy alone, the annual premiums we collect on it, and remember this too, sir. She was a client of the company's long before she married Teckler. She's the widow of the late Horace Rathbun Mellinger. Well, you know.
The big steel and oil fortune.
Yeah.
Well, it's no wonder, then, the Tecklers are loaded.
Precisely.
Well, just give me their address, and I'll see what I can do about inaugurating a Share the Wealth program. I drove north on 42 for some 25 miles to Monticello. Especially at this time of the year, this foot of the Catskills country is mighty beautiful. Then west for a few miles to the little town of Bethel, then north on a narrow, twisting little road to a spot somewhere between Canosa Lake and Swan Lake. There was a tall steel wire fence about the place, but the heavy gate was unlocked, so I went on through. And there it was. About as isolated and beautiful a place as I've ever seen. It might as well have been 100 miles away from the dozens of resorts and vacation